Hey guys, Sam Limon here, back with another tutorial, and this time we're going to be working on our Illustrator practice exercise. It's the very first project in Illustrator after the interface, which is not really a project, but more, working your way around the interface and getting comfortable with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our Schoology page, and we're going to go down to week 7 vector intro. Keep in mind that the weeks might change, but we are looking for the vector intro right after our Photoshop projects. And we're going to be looking for this Illustrator practice exercises.zip file. So these are going to be some sketches that we're going to use for our first practice exercise, just to start getting comfortable with Illustrator before we jump into our book work. So go ahead and click on this Illustrator practice exercises folder. And we're going to have the folder pop up again. Go ahead and click on it, and that downloads it into our downloads folder. So go ahead and open up our downloads folder, and it should be right here. So Illustrator practice exercises. Now at this point you should have a folder with your name on it. If you don't, go ahead and create one. Again, can't stress it enough. Try to work on your own USB drive if you happen to be working on the school computer. Try to transfer your files right away into a USB drive, because people might be sitting in different locations. Your spot might be taken, so you want to have your work with you. So try to do that sooner than later. And then you want to drag this file that we just downloaded, the Illustrator practice exercises, and drag that into your personal folder or USB drive. Let me go ahead and make sure it takes it. There we go. Close this. Now we could work on our folder. So I'm going to open up my personal folder, and I'm going to go to this Illustrator practice exercises.zip file. Go ahead and double click it if you are on a Mac, and it should unzip it and give you a new folder. If you are on a PC or on a Windows computer, I believe you could click expand or extract all above, and it's going to give you all the files. So now if I click on here and I go into the images, you should see a gear, a helicopter, a penguin, and a shark. So we're going to be recreating these shortly. Now let's go ahead and open up a Illustrator, and we're going to open up a new file. So to do that, we're going to click create new. Before that, let me show you here. These are recent files that were just open. You don't want to rely on these as this is where your files are. This just shows you the recent files that have been opened. If I was to take one of these files and move it physically, like in this folder, that's where I have all my stuff, move it around, put it in a different folder, and if I try to open it from here, it's not going to work. If you're working on a USB drive and you see your file here, and if your USB drive is not connected, it's going to show it as a recent file, but if you click on it, it's not going to be able to open it. If you delete something, it's not going to be able to open it. So again, don't rely on this unless it's your personal computer. But if somebody's moving things around, which people are in shared computers, you might not find things. So don't rely on this recent list. Rely on your folder on your USB drive. So just a little note. So back to where we were, we're going to create a new file. So create new. And just to make things easy, let's select a letter sized file, and go ahead and name it here, preset details. I'm going to highlight where it says untitled 4. Yours might say untitled 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Highlight that, and let's put a name on it. So I'm going to name this Illustrator practice exercise hyphen, and then go ahead and put your name. So I'm going to put Limon. And so just so you know, when we click this, it gives us the width of 8.5 and the height of 11 inches. So let's go ahead and do a horizontal or a landscape orientation. So if we click on that, that changes the width to 11 inches and the height of 8.5. Let's start off with one artboard, and we'll add more when we're in the file. We could always do that. We don't need a bleed right now. This is just practice, but this is where you would change that. Let's keep it at RGB color mode. We could always change it to CMYK, but the colors look a little bit more dull. It just depends what the project requires. For our purposes, just go ahead and click on RGB. Raster effects. This is any effects that we do. Let's go ahead and just do medium. We're not going to mess with effects too much. And preview mode default. So this is good. Once we have all that, go ahead and click create. So this created the file. Let me close this. So this is our document. 11 inches wide, 8.5 inches tall. Now let's go ahead and save this. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. And we want to put it in our main folder. You know, if you have a folder name, you could create a new folder and name it, you know, practice exercise, whatever you want. I just have a jumbled mess within my Sam Limon folder, but I'll be able to find it just based on the name, so it is good. I'm going to go ahead and save it. Under version, Illustrator, you want to put the highest version of Illustrator, so I'm going to do 2020. And it says compatible with Illustrator 24 and above. That's good. I don't mess with any of these settings, so just leave all these as is, and then go ahead and save it. Click OK. So now our file is saved. If I was to open up my folder and scroll down to Illustrator practice exercise, here it is. It's the .ai file. So I have 3 files right now. I have the zip file, which I originally downloaded, the unzip file that has all these images, and I have my Illustrator file that should have my name on it. Make sure it has your name. Okay, so first things first is creating shapes. So if you go over here into your tools panel, I have my ellipse tool. If you click and hold, let's go ahead and select our rectangle tool. Now, if I click once, this pop-up comes up and it tells me what size do I want my rectangle. So let's say I want to do a width of 3 inches and a height of 1 inch. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So that gives me a rectangle that has exactly those parameters. Now, if I click and drag, this is another way to put a shape. Click and drag. I could add a rectangle like that as well. Before letting go, it's showing me the width and the height right there at the bottom right. So I can make it the exact same size, 3 by 1 if I wanted to. Or I can make it a whole different size and I could drag up or down. Now, with the same tool, if I click and drag, and before letting go, if I hold shift, it's going to give me a perfect square. And you could see the width and the height, and they're going to be the same. So that's the basic way of bringing in shapes. One is just simply click once, one is clicking and dragging, and one is holding shift. Holding shift is basically the same as this one, except we are constraining the width and the height to be exactly the same. Okay, so now that was one of the shape tools. So if we click and hold on the rectangle tool, you can see we have the ellipse tool, polygon, rounded rectangle, star tool, etc. So any of these tools work pretty much the same way when you want to make one of these shapes. Now let's move on to the selection tool. We also have the direct selection tool, which are going to be the black and white arrows. So let's click on our selection tool. So that lets us select any shape that we have. So right now we could see the bounding box, the blue bounding box around this one. So this one is selected. To select one of them, simply go like right where it says path here. So right on a path, click, and that's going to let you select different shapes. I could also make a selection by clicking and dragging So if I click and drag and I select all the shapes, the selection tool allows you to move, rotate, scale, and you could copy with it too. So let me show you how to move something first. So first you have to select it. So again, if you want to deselect anything, click away from it in the white area. Now nothing is selected. So if I hover over here, you could see it gets the blue lines. That means my cursor is right over it. So I could click, that selects it. Now I could click and drag it and move it around. So that is how you move an item, or you move a shape. To rotate it, you simply put your cursor just a little bit. Let me go ahead and zoom in. So we could do Command plus or Command minus to zoom in or out. If I put my cursor just outside of the edge of a corner, and you get those little arrows that have a curve, if I click and drag on that, it lets you rotate something. Now, if I want to scale it, I simply click on a corner and you see those two arrows, and I can start dragging it down. If I hold shift, it's going to keep it proportionate to its original size. If I don't, if I let go of shift, I can make it thinner, taller, etc. So that's how you would scale something. And obviously, if you want to undo something, you could go to Edit, Undo Scale, or Control Z or Command Z. And there we go. So let's go back to that. So that is our selection tool. One more thing, if we want to copy something, if we want to copy this square per se, I could select it with my selection tool. I could do Edit Copy and Edit Paste. So that pastes another copy of it. Let me just, now this one's selected. I could see because it has a blue bounding box around it. If I just click on delete, it's going to delete it. So that's one way. We could do the shortcuts. So select something. I say I want to select this one. Do Command or Control C to copy, and then Command or Control V to paste. That's going to paste a copy of what was just selected. I'm going to delete that. Now I'm going to move down a bit, so hold the space bar. That gives us our hand tool, and I could drag this to give me some space. I could also make sure I'm on my selection tool. Nothing selected. If I hold Option or Alt and I put my cursor over this shape, now if I drag it, simply as if I was going to move it, but I'm holding Option or Alt, it makes a copy. And I can make another copy if I keep holding Option or Alt. So you can make copies that way. Let me select both of these, delete it, and zoom out. Command or Control minus to zoom out. We also have our direct selection tool. So if you click on the white arrow here, now if we select on one of these shapes, I'm going to go to the square and select it. So the direct selection tool, it lets you manipulate anchors, paths, and handles. So anchor points are these points right here. 2 anchor points make a path. And if we have a circle, for example, I'm going to click on my rectangle tool over here, select the ellipse tool, and I'm going to hold shift and drag, and I'm going to create a circle. Now I'm going to click on my direct selection tool. You could see our anchor points here. We could see our path. However, this is curved, so if I click on my anchor point with my direct selection tool, I also have what's called handles. So this is what makes up the vectors. It's anchor points, paths, and handles. And if I click on this anchor point once, that lets me know it's selected. See, all these are white. This one is in blue. Now I could click and drag and move this anchor point, and I could manipulate the shape. So this is what the direct selection tool lets you customize these shapes. Now if I click on the handle and I drag it out, I could change the curve of the shape. So I could move handles, or sorry, I could move anchors and I could move handles. So I can make them shorter, and it makes this anchor kind of, it makes these paths come to kind of like a sharp point on the anchor, or I could extend these handles and it makes it more round, more of a curve. The same thing with, let me move this, so select my direct selection tool, move it. I'm gonna resize this, bring it down, select my square here, click on my direct selection tool. The same thing, if I select an anchor first, you have to select it. You could tell it's selected because again it's blue and all of these are white. Now I could move it around. Now one thing that I could do is I could also add anchor points to a shape. So if I go into my pen tool, which if I just click on the letter P, it's right here, and I click and hold, and I go to add anchor point tool, select that. Now I could go anywhere along the path and I could click, and add anchor points. Now I could go to my direct selection tool and I can manipulate these as I want as well. So out of that square, I now have this shape. And we're just playing around here just to show you what this does. Now if I want to make one of these anchor points to have curves like we had in this circle, I could just select an anchor point, make sure it's blue, it's selected. Now up here on our control bar, I could click on this one, convert selected anchor point to smooth. So I click on it, now it gives me handles, and I could curve it. Now let's say if I have a point that I don't want to have a curve, so let's just select another one. I'm going to make it round. Now let's say I don't want this one to have that handle. I simply select that anchor point and back up here and convert in our control panel. Convert selected anchor point to corner. So I could click on that and that gets rid of the handle. And let's do that to this other one as well. So there we go. Okay, so now let's go back and let's select our selection tool. And I'm going to hold the space bar and drag to move over here. I'm going to select this first rectangle that we made. Now, if we go to our color panel here, open that one up, then click on the hamburger icon and click on show options. This gives you, see how this is selected? This top one, this is going to be our fill. This bottom one's going to be our stroke. So right now it is a white box with a black stroke. We could click and drag here to select different colors. So this is only affecting what's called the fill, which is the actual color of the box. So you could put in your hex code here if you have one. You know, you could drag these sliders down, or you could move around in here. That's one way to choose color. Or you could go in here and you could double click on the fill and you have this color picker box. Again, you could always put a hex code here. You could copy it and paste it somewhere else if you want it. If you have certain CMYK colors, percentages, you could put them here. You know, you could drag around here, move this slider. Let's say I want that color, click OK, and there we go. Now we also have a stroke, so we could double click on this black one here in our tools panel and we could change it over here. Let's say we want blue, click OK. Now it's a little hard to tell right now. Let me zoom in, Command plus. I could always change the stroke up here, the stroke weight. So let's increase it to 8 points. Keep in mind, if I go in here and I double click in the stroke color and I change this, click OK, that's affecting my stroke. So just make sure you're on the correct one here. The same thing here, if you go into your control panel, you could change it to any of these colors that are already up here, or you could add more. So, and this first one is affecting the fill, and the second one is affecting the stroke. So you're gonna have different colors here, gradients. We'll get into gradients later. Or the same with the color here. So just make sure you know which one is on top. So that's gonna be our stroke. Let's go to green. There we go. So with my selection tool, click away, and now that is not selected. So go ahead and make some other like random shapes. Go ahead and let's do the start tool right now, and go ahead and click and drag, and notice how it keeps the same effects as what we were just working on. If you don't have a star, you could use the up or down arrow keys before letting go, and you could make a triangle with this. Or you could click the up arrow and you could keep adding more of these spikes. So I'm going to go down to where it's a star. Now if I hold shift, I could scale it up like that. I'm going to make a star, and I'm going to change the colors on this. So change it whichever way you want. So I'm going to change the stroke to this color and the fill to this color. Click on my selection tool, and now I could move it around. And I'm just going to give each one of these shapes a different color, just so we could see what is happening. Okay, so now if I start stacking these up on top of each other, you could see that some are on top of one another. So basically, the newest shape that you make, I'm just gonna click on my rectangle tool. The newest shape that I make is gonna be on top of the previous one. And we could see that within the layers panel. So if we go to Window, Layers, let me pull this out over here. Now if I make this window a little bit bigger, a little taller, and I open up this layer 1, everything is within layer 1. So layers are a little bit more simple here. I could open this up and I could see my layers here. Now my red rectangle with that turquoise stroke is at the bottom. So if I click and select it here, you can see it's selected with this blue marker on the right. If I click on any one of these, it's going to select it as well. So you could see that oval that is hidden is right there. Now I could arrange the order of these as well. So I could just click on, for example, that bottom rectangle, drag it all the way up. So now it's on top of everything in the layer stack. And if I move it over, it's on top of everything. If I bring it down 1, it's almost on top of everything, but there's going to be one rectangle that's going to be above it, one of those gold rectangles, and that's going to be that one. If I select this, there's that one. Now I say I want to bring the star up to the front, bring it up, or I could take it all the way down. There's also shortcuts to these. So let's say I want to select the star. In order to select it here, I need to click on the right over here. And just like Photoshop, if we want to make it not visible, we could turn off the little eye here, turn it off or on. We could do that as well. So, and if we want to lock something, for example, the star, lock it there, just to the right of the eye. Now I cannot select it. So let's unlock it, select it. Now if we go to Object, Arrange, we could bring to front. And the shortcut is Shift, Command or Control, and right bracket. That's going to bring it all the way to the top. And if you want to take it all the way to the bottom, is Shift, Command or Control, and left bracket. That takes it to the bottom. Now if you don't hold Shift, if you just do Command or Control and you do right bracket, if you look at the layers panel, notice how it goes up one at a time. So I'm holding Command or Control and clicking the right bracket one at a time. Now it's all the way to the top. If I do the left bracket, it's going one at a time to the bottom. So just remember, Shift and Command or Control takes it to the very top or to the very bottom in one shot. Or again, you could drag these around. Okay, now let's say you want to align these. I'm gonna make sure I'm on my selection tool, click and drag all of these, and go to our alignment panel. If you do not have it, go to Window, Align, and I could align these objects on the left hand side over here. So click on that. That puts the leftmost anchor points on the left, and they're all aligned. If I want to align these centered horizontally, now that puts them in the center. Or I could right align them as well. Now they're kind of all messed up, but let's just put them in different places here. And let's do the same thing. So now I'm gonna click and drag to select everything. Now let's align them left, and you could see what's happening. Now the stroke here, it's thicker, so you could see it slightly to the left here as well. It's not taking into consideration the stroke, it's taking into consideration the actual points, the anchor points. So the point stops here. The stroke is just an effect, so remember we could make that go thicker or thinner, so that's going to stick out more or less, but the actual path is not going to change. Okay, so after that, go ahead and just move your shapes around, leave them all here, and we're going to make a new artboard. So open up your artboard panel, or if you don't have it, again, Window and Artboards. And you could click on this little square with the plus icon. Click on that, and that's going to give you a new artboard to the right of this one. So let's go ahead, and this is a good time to save, so go ahead and save it. And we're going to make a few new shapes. Click anywhere here to make sure nothing is selected. And let's go ahead and choose any random colors. So I'm going to choose red as a fill color, and I'm going to choose black as a stroke. And a 1-point stroke is fine. Now I'm going to create a square and just drag and hold Shift. Now I'm going to click and hold and do an ellipse. Hold Shift and drag, so now I have two shapes. And actually, let's go ahead and change the color on this one. So I'm going to double click here, and I'm going to make it a yellow, just so we could differentiate. And click on our selection tool. Now I'm going to drag this circle over the square, and I'm going to zoom in a little, so Command or Control plus. Hold the space bar to navigate. Now I have both of these shapes and they're overlapping. I could see the ellipse is over the rectangle in my layers panel, and I could visually see it here. We also have the Pathfinder tool, which lets us combine shapes. So if I click and drag and select these two, and I open up my Pathfinder panel, I have it right here. If you don't have it, again, Window and Pathfinder. Now we have these shape modes. So the first one is Unite, and you could see by the little icon it's going to unite shapes. So if I click on that, it turns it into one shape, and it's taking the color of the topmost layer. And I could see the shape here, it's just one solid shape. So let me undo that, Command or Control Z. Now if I move the rectangle up above the ellipse, technically overall it's still the same shape. If I click and drag to select both of them, go to my Pathfinder tool and Unite, it's going to be the same shape, but now it's red because the red was on top. So let me go ahead and undo that, Command or Control Z. One thing I could do also is select both of these, and the next one is minus front. So it's going to subtract the front from the back one. So if I click on that, it leaves the back shape, but it uses this one as kind of like a cookie cutter. So let me undo that. Now let's say I have I'm gonna make this rectangle smaller. Select both of these. Now if I do minus front, it's going to subtract the front from the back. So it looks like there's a white square underneath or on top, but when actually it's a hole. So I could go there and I could see underneath it. So this is how you would make, for example, like a donut shape that has a hole inside. So understand that this, and let's say this, now if I make this rectangle or this square white, these are not the same. This is a shape with the hole cut out, and this is two separate shapes. On white they look the same, but over here with a different colored background they look different, and you could tell. And you could also tell here in the in our shapes here. So we have this one, which has a hole in it. Then we have a yellow ellipse and a white rectangle. You could also do, let's make a couple other shapes. So I'm going to make a rectangle. I'm going to make an ellipse. Give them both different colors again. Selection tool. Now if I select both of these, and in our Pathfinder tool, if we do this intersect, if you notice, it's going to get rid of both the outside shapes and it's going to keep the inside one. And if we do, so I just undid that, and if we do this one, divide, if I click on it, visually it looks like almost like nothing happened, but since it has a stroke, now if I go to my selection tool, I could move these around. Actually now it's grouped, so it groups it. If I right click and then ungroup and click away, and now I have three separate shapes. So just like it showed here. And while we're on that, let me show you how to group items. So let's go ahead and make another shape and another shape. Now if I click on my selection tool, if I select both of these, I could see they're both separate shapes within that first layer. If I right click and group, that's going to make a group. So if I select away from these, now if I click and move, it's going to treat this as one shape. However, it is a group, so they're not merged. So if I click on this little arrow here, it gives me the individual shapes. So now if I want to, for example, select just the blue circle, well, if I'm on my selection tool, this is a group, so it takes everything. So I'd have to select it here in the layers panel, and then I could move it, or select the green square and I could move it. Or another option, if I click away and select this, again everything's selected, the group is selected, I could go into my direct selection tool, click and hold. Now I could click on group selection tool. So that allows me to select individual shapes within a group. Now let's say I want to take these out of the group. I could just click on my selection tool, select the whole group, right click, and then ungroup. And now I have these as individuals. Now, so that is one layer. I could also close this, collapse this, and I could add another layer. Let's say this was shapes. So I'm going to double click layer 1, name it shapes, press return or enter. I could lock it. Now I could select layer 2, make sure I'm selected on it, double click it, and I could name this type, press return or enter. Now since this whole layer is locked, I could zoom out. So that's all these layers within both artboards. I could turn those off and on, and they're locked, so I cannot select anything. So let me zoom in. And actually one thing that I forgot to mention when we added points, when we added the anchor points to a shape, let's go ahead and unlock our shapes, and I'm gonna click on our direct selection tool, take any of these shapes, and I'm gonna zoom in. And remember, with our pen tool we could add points. let's go ahead and remove points. So we could click and hold again on the pen tool, and we could delete anchor point. We could select the delete anchor point tool, and we could delete points with this. Now you want to make sure you don't do this. Watch. So this is a shape in itself, and I'm going to make a copy of it. So I'm going to hold Option or Alt and drag it to the right. Now I'm going to click and drag to select both of these, and I'm going to remove the stroke. So I'm going to go to this right hand part, the black stroke, and I'm going to select none. So now it's just that green shape. Quick little shortcut, or we could also do view and outline, Command Y, and that shows us just the paths. So the shortcut is Command or Control Y. So we have the preview and the outline mode. That just shows us the paths. So now, if I click on the direct selection tool and I select this path on this one, and if I just press delete without actually using the pen tool, press delete, it deletes that point, and it leaves an open path, basically an open shape. Now visually you can't tell. It looks like it's a shape, but it is not. If I do Command or Control Y, you could see that this is not a shape. So be careful with that when you're making shapes. You want to make sure that it is a closed path. Whereas this one, let's say I remove this point, I'm going to remove it here, but it still connects it. So make sure you use this, not delete, unless you specifically want to have a shape that doesn't connect. Now if I do Command Y, they both look the same, but they're not. This one, if I hover over it, I could see the full path. This one is just 2 lines. And Illustrator is just trying to connect it visually. However, it does not have a closed path. So if I select both of these, now if I add a stroke, you could see this one has a stroke around the shape. This one doesn't have anything to fill it up with because there is technically no line there. And if I move with the direct selection tool, if I move this point, all it's doing is just trying to fill it in, but there's nothing there. Now let's say you wanted to connect it. You could always go to your pen tool and you could click on one of these points and then click on this other one, and you get that little circle there. So that makes it a complete shape. Alrighty, so now let's go back to where we were. Let's go ahead and lock our shapes and select our type layer. And let me zoom out a bit. And good time to save. So Command or Control S. Okay, so now we're gonna add some type into our type layer. So keep in mind you could add as many layers as you want, but the shapes or type will be going into each layer. So in order to create type, just click on your type tool. And actually, if you click and hold, you have different options. So you could do the type area tool, you could type on a path. We'll get into a project where we do that. You could do vertical type area tool. And you have a couple more, but we're just going to stick to the main type tool. So I'm going to click once, and that gives me some lorem ipsum, which is dummy text based off of Latin, and you could just start typing. So I'm going to type in Adobe Illustrator. Now if I click with my selection tool, it treats it like an object, so I could again just click and drag and move it around. If I click on a corner with my selection tool, I could scale it up. If you do this, keep in mind you want to hold shift. You never want to stretch the type and then let go of the mouse and then of shift. So you never want to make it like this, or you never want to make it like this. You're really distorting the type, so always hold shift. Once you're at the end of, let's say you're creating a logo or type or whatever that you want to actually make it narrower, feel free to do it. just a little bit, but you always want to keep it scaled as long as you can. Now, in order to get back in here, actually, scratch that. We could also rotate this. So if I put my cursor outside here, I could rotate it. So that's scaling, rotating, and placing text. Now, to go in here and change it or edit the text, I have to click on my type tool, put my cursor inside, and then I could click and drag and highlight everything, or I could do Command or Control A to select everything. Now I could go into my type tool, so window, type, and go to character, and I could change the font here. So I could go and change it to, let's say, impact. So this one doesn't have a bold, so let's try something else. So I'm gonna do ATC Garnet, and then I could do medium or ultra. Here I could change the font size, so I could scale it up here with the up arrows, down arrows, and again I already showed you how to do it with the selection tool and scaling it. Now if we have, let's say we have this in different lines, so I'm going to do a backspace, put my cursor before Illustrator, backspace, press enter or return. Now do Command or Control A to select everything. I could change the leading here, which is the space between the lines. So if I press down, it's gonna decrease the size here, so it's gonna bring Illustrator closer to Adobe. And if I increase this, I can make it bigger. I could also do tracking here. So this is gonna be the spacing between the words, so I could increase it here, or I could decrease it here. And we also have kerning here. So kerning is more specific to the spacing between letters. So let's say we're looking at the negative space between the R and the A here, so we could bring this a little bit closer. If I'm on my type tool, which I am, I could put my cursor between the R and the A, and I could decrease this here. So it's going to be quite a bit, and bring that R and the A closer. Another shortcut for this, if we go back to 0, with our cursor there, if you hold Option or Alt and you use the left arrow key, that takes you in like further increments. So you could see it's -20, -40, so maybe a -40 looks pretty good. And this is just on certain letters that you might want to bring in closer. Some of the problem letters are like T, A, or maybe ST. So let's say the TA actually, let me erase this. You want to bring this closer. So let's say it was tap water. You could see there's a lot more space between the T and the A than there is between the A and the P. So you just put your cursor here and hold Option or Alt and use the left arrow key to bring it in, so that looks a little bit better. And then the A and the T as well on this side, you could bring that in, so Option and bring the left arrow key, let go of Option or Alt, click the left arrow key. Now let's bring that W and the A closer together. And that looks a bit better. So that is kerning. And I'm going to click on my selection tool. Now right now it is still live type, so I could click on the type tool, put my cursor in here, and just type in whatever I want. But if I click on my selection tool, and if I do Command or Control Y, where it shows me the shapes, it shows it in black, right? Now let's go ahead and make a copy of this. So hold Option or Alt and drag it down. Now I'm going to right click and click on Create Outlines. Now I have the path of the type. So this is still live type. This is no longer live type. These are shapes. I could do Command Y. I'm going to change the color of this to blue. And I'm going to change the color of this to a different type of blue. Really doesn't matter. So they look the same. However, this is now a shape. And I'm going to zoom in. Again, Command or Control Y. That shows you the shapes. Now if I go into my direct selection tool If I click on this, it shows nothing. If I click on this one, now I could see the points, the anchor points of these letters. If I click on the R, I could see these handles, so I could go in and manipulate these words as well, or these letter shapes. So you could do like a custom font or a custom logo. Now remember, when you're on your direct selection tool, you have to click on a point first, make sure it's selected, it's red, and all of these are whites, and I could select each one and make this funky like that. And again, if I want to make it have some handles, I could click on here and I could mess with these handles as well. So something you cannot do with that. So if you're ever working on a logo and you're gonna do something like this, make sure to save a copy outside with your live type before you get in here, and just keep it saved like that, because eventually you start doing enough changes, you'll get to a point where you forget what font you used and it's going to be hard to go back. A client might want it, so you always want to have a live version of your type somewhere on the outside, you know, just know what font it is. So that's a little bit about type. And again, you could always add a stroke to this if you want, so I'm going to add a red stroke. Now, if you notice, the stroke is on the kind of on the middle of the path. If I go to my stroke panel, go to Window and Stroke. Let me go ahead and click on Show Options on the little hamburger icons. I could select where the stroke is aligned here. So right now it is on the center of the path. If I do it on the inside of the path, it goes on the inside and on the outside, so I could get some effects like that. Let's see, the caps, it doesn't really do it here. I'll show you the caps in a bit. Corners, I could do the round join, so it makes these corners round, or this one, it cuts them off like that. So just depending on the effect you want, and you could always change the weight of the strokes here. So I always like on type especially putting the stroke on the outside, and then it just depends what you want here. Now if I just have, this isn't type related, but let's say I just make a shape here. So I'm going to use the line segment tool. I'm going to use no fill and a red stroke. I wasn't trying to do that, but I had that the type selected, so I'm going to undo. So I click on my selection tool, click away to deselect. Now I'm going to click on my line segment tool, and I'm going to click and drag and make sure I have no fill and whatever color, doesn't matter what color, stroke. So I'm going to choose green and zoom in a bit. Now I could change the cap of this line. So again, this isn't a shape, this is just a path. It's a line, not a complete shape. So I could always change the weight of it. If I do Command Y, it's still just the line, it's still just the path. It's not showing the an outline of this shape because it is not a shape. Right now the cap is set to a butt cap, which is flat across here. However, I could change it to a round cap, so that's going to round it out here. Now let's say I wanted to change this to a shape. I'm going to make a copy of this, hold Option and drag it down. So one of these is going to be just the path. It's 2 points and the path. Now if I select this one, I could go to Object and click on Expand. And I want to expand the fill and stroke. You could leave stroke on, it's fine. Click OK. Now that made it a shape. Now notice if I select this one, the stroke is green, but it has no fill because it's just a path, it's a line segment. This one, since we expanded it, it's a shape, it's a green shape. If we do Command Y, we could see that this one is its own shape. So just something to know, and they both look identically the same. So just to know that you could expand certain shapes and stuff like that. So with that said and done, let's go into this like tap water here. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to expand this one. So this one has pretty much the shape with a stroke. If I go to Object, Expand, Expand Appearance, now this expanded the stroke as well, so it has no stroke. And you notice right here, whereas before, if I undo, it had a blue fill and a red stroke. Again, Object, Expand Appearance. Now it's telling us the shape. It's giving us a question mark because it's selecting two different parts of fill. The turquoise, light bluish, and the red. And there is no stroke to this. So one thing I could do when I do this is I could click on my direct selection tool, and I could manipulate the stroke itself, and we still have a shape behind that's going to be that T. So it creates two shapes out of the fill and the stroke. So let's go ahead and save, and that's a little bit on type. Okay, now let's go ahead and add another artboard. So let's go to our artboard panel, create another one. I'm going to work on this one a little bit, and then we'll continue on the next artboard. So one more thing that I wanted to show, going back to kind of like these shapes, and the Pathfinder. We could also do something like this. Watch, I'm going to actually lock up my type, unlock my shapes, select my shape layer, all in my layers panel. I'm going to put all my characters here, all my type stuff, and my Pathfinder here. I'm going to make a shape. I'm going to choose any color for the fill. No stroke is fine. And then I'm going to click on my shapes, and I'm going to do polygon tool, click and drag. Again, with this one you could use the up or down arrow keys, kind of like the star tool. And I'm going to do a triangle, and I'm going to double click here, change its color, click OK, and make it a little smaller, hold shift. Now I'm going to go to my selection tool, move it over it. Another thing that we could do instead of using the Pathfinder to join stuff or to do the minus front, I could select both of these. If I do Command Y, I could see both shapes are separate, right? And I could see that here, and if I expand my layers panel, I could see both of them here as well. If I select both of them, I also have my shape builder tool. Shortcut is Shift M, as in money. Go ahead and click on that. I could click and drag to join all these shapes. It basically breaks it down to 3. Once I let go, it joins them all into one shape. Let's undo that. If I just click on one of these, it's gonna make a separate shape out of this. So I could click on my shape tool, click and move, and it kind of just breaks them apart. So let's undo again, make it 3 separate shapes. Now if I select all of them and I click on my shape builder tool again, if I hold Option or Alt, it could remove shapes. So I could do that to the center one, and it's gonna basically put a hole in it, so now I have 2 shapes. Undo. I could also hold Option or Alt and click and drag, make a line into this one, and it's gonna erase that part. So it kind of functions as a like as a Pathfinder tool, but you just have a little bit more control. So that's a little bit more on that. So let's go ahead and lock up our shapes. And now let's go ahead and I'm going to zoom out, go to our third artboard. And what we're going to do is we're going to place a sketch. So this is where we're going to start bringing in some of those images that we made. So let's go ahead and start putting a lot of these tools to use now. So let's go ahead and make another layer, and we're going to name this penguin. So click on create new layer. Whichever layer you have selected, it's going to put that layer right above it. So this one's going to put it right above shapes. I could always drag this up above type, and double click on layer 3, and we're gonna name this penguin. Press return or enter, make sure it's still selected. Now we're gonna go to file, place. So let's go to file, place. Shortcut is shift, command or control, and P. And we're gonna navigate to our folder that we downloaded, the practice exercises. So Illustrator practice exercises. We're gonna select our penguin JPEG, and we are gonna make sure to click on template. What template does is it allows us to do, let me show you. If we just do link and click place, and we click on it, it places the image at full, basically what it looks like. I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. I'm gonna go to file, place, and I wanna make sure it's a template. So I wanna go to penguin, click on template, place, and it places it, and you see it's a little bit dull, and that's okay. So what we want to do is go ahead and unlock it in our layers panel, and then we can select it, click on our selection tool, and we could move it around. And let's lock it again, and let's select our penguin layer. So the template is just so that we could basically trace over it. So now let's start thinking of this in terms of shapes. So I'm going to zoom in a bit. So I'm looking at, there's almost a circle here. So let's go ahead and start off with the circle. So I'm going to click on my ellipse tool. Black fill is fine. I'm going to hold shift and start dragging from the top left and create a circle. Let go of the mouse and then let go of shift. I could click on these little arrows to swap the fill and the stroke. So right now there's no stroke and there's a black fill. So if I swap these, I'm going to have no fill and a black stroke. Now I could click on my selection tool, drag it up, and that looks pretty good. And I'm going to fill the rest of this shape. So I'm going to click on my ellipse tool, click and hold, and select my rectangle tool. Now I'm going to click down here. Notice how that pink line shows up. That's kind of a guide, or that is a guide, and that is under view and smart guides. So if you have smart guides on, you're going to get things like that. So you're going to get that line that's going to help you out. So once that line shows up and I'm lined up at the bottom, I'm going to click and drag up to where that center, those center anchors of the ellipse are. So I'm going to select that. So I'm going to finish that, and then I'm going to click on my selection tool. I could click and drag to select both shapes, and I'm going to go to my Pathfinder panel, and I'm going to unite these. So there we have this like rectangle, or this shape that was made out of a rectangle and an ellipse. Now I look at the next shape that I have here is a circle here. So I could just click on my ellipse tool. So go back to where my rectangle tool is, select my ellipse tool, and I'm going to hold shift and click and drag. And I'm going to, once I have it as a circle, I could always click on my selection tool. I could drag it over here. I could just line it up on the left side, hold shift and drag it until it matches with the right side. Now I could bring it down, and there we go, we have an ellipse. Now if you notice, when I scaled it, this got a little bit thicker. So I could select both and just choose stroke and choose 1 point, and that makes this one a little bit smaller. Now we also have the arc tool, which is nested under the line segment tool. So we could click on that, select the arc tool, and click and drag, so you could see what this does. And I'm going to leave it about there. Now I'm going to click on my selection tool, bring it in to this part of the eye, zoom in, Command or Control plus, and remember I'm always holding space and clicking with my mouse and dragging. Now I could rotate this, maybe make it a little bit bigger. I could hold shift, rotate this. Doesn't have to be exact, you get it pretty close. And you could go into your stroke panel or in your properties. Now if you click on stroke here, you could always change that. Since it's a line, you could change the cap to a rounded cap here. There's also something else that you could do. You could go up here where it says on your control panel where it says uniform, and you could check on this width profile, which has 2 sharp points. So click on that, and now you have this this shape here, which I prefer, but it's up to you. So you could do that. Now let's look at the nose. It's kind of like a triangle, so we could always go choose our polygon tool, and I could click and drag and go ahead and hold shift. If your polygon tool doesn't give you a triangle, you could use your up or down arrow keys before you release, and that just gives you sides. So the minimum we could have here is 3 sides, so that is a triangle. Hold shift, and that gives me a triangle. So now I'm going to click on my selection tool. I'm going to rotate it. So put my cursor just outside of these this bounding box and drag it. If I hold shift while rotating, it's going to snap into like 45, 90 degrees. So I want it to go this way, and I'm going to scale it down a bit. And I'm going to zoom in here. I could also click on this part and scale it out that way. And it looks like I need to rotate it down here because that bottom part looks more flat. So this is starting to look a bit more like it. Maybe I could narrow it down here. And I could also click on my direct selection tool, click on this point, and move the angles. So there we go. Now one thing that's not showing up here is there's usually some little circles that pop up. It might be under view. Right here, hide corner widget. If I select that, I get these points. So I could click on that and drag it out or drag it in, and it's gonna change the corners of that shape. So that gives me that round shape. I'm gonna click away. I'm going to show you also on a rectangle tool. Now that those are on, if I click and drag, those points are there, so I could click and round the corners of pretty much any shape. And if you want to get rid of those, I could go to view and hide corner widget, so they're gone there. So I'm going to leave them on. And maybe that green is not the best to see on the screen, so let me double click on penguin. See how this is green? Double click on it. I'm going to change the color of this to teal. Click OK. Cancel. And now that changed all of this to teal. So let's go to view. Hide. Oops, wrong one. It's going to be show corner widget. So there they are. So that's probably a little easier for you guys to see. So I could click on that and move it around. So let me delete this shape. So just press delete while it's selected. This one, you could see it there. So it used to be a sharp point, back to what it was. So I want to go right there and zoom out, and there's the shape. Okay, so now that I'm looking at it, I have a couple shapes that are very similar. So I have this shape and the tail, so the arm and the tail, or the wing and the tail. Penguins have wings, not arms. And I'm going to copy this, so I could hold Option or Alt and drag and copy it, and I could do Command or Control C and Command or Control V and copy another one. So I'm going to do this. Now let's zoom in and do the wing. So I'm going to click on my selection tool, select this one, rotate it, scale it, do what I have to, hold shift. Keep in mind, it doesn't have to be exact, just try to get it as close as you can. So that's, I'm gonna call that pretty good. So there's that, and I'm gonna do the tail here. So I'm gonna click and drag this to the right and rotate it again. Try to get it as close as you can. I noticed I picked up this shape, so be careful with what you select. So I'm going to undo, Command or Control Z. Click away to select and make sure I'm right on the path to select this, and then click on it and drag it. And I'm going to scale it here, maybe rotate it a little bit more, and I'm trying to align it to where it matches with this, so that's pretty close. Now I'm going to do this shape right here that's kind of like the belly area, so I'm going to click on my rectangle tool and I'm going to put my cursor right at the bottom right corner so that it matches here, the bottom right here. And now I'm going to match this line and that top line. And I'm going to, now I could click and drag this. However, I was trying to get that curve. However, it takes all of them, right? So it's doing all four corners. So let me undo. Now, if I click on my direct selection tool and just select this top left corner widget, and if I drag that one, it's only going to affect that corner. So I'm trying to match this, and there it is, perfect. Now I'm going to do the feet, which the same, I could do it with the rectangle. So I'm going to line it up with the bottom here and try to match it with the right here. There we go. And direct selection tool, click on this top right corner widget and bring it in a bit till it matches. Now I could click on my selection tool, Command C, Command V to copy it, and let's do this other one here. So there we go. Okay, now I'm going to do these two little hairs up there, so I could just do them a couple ways. I could do the line segment tool and I could just click and drag on here, or I could use my pen tool, and that's going to allow me to add a point here, and wherever else I add a point again, it's going to connect those with the path. And then I click escape, and there we go. And if you want to go ahead and select both of these, zoom in, and it appears that I already had my stroke set to a round cap, so that's what I was going to do. And let's go ahead and make one of these a little bit thicker. So I'm going to select this one, the top one, and just to give it a little variation, make that one 2 points, and this one 1 point. So there we go. Good, time to save. Okay, now we're going to do this pentagon shape with the star. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to click on my polygon tool, and I'm going to click and drag, and then I'm going to press up. So it was at a triangle, so that's 3 sides up, 4 sides up, 5 sides. Before letting go, I'm going to hold shift and then let go of the mouse, then let go of shift. I'm going to click on my selection tool, drag it over here and resize it. So I'm going to hold shift, and that's about right. Now I'm going to do a star, so I'm going to click on my polygon tool, click on my star tool. Now if I click and drag, and if I hold shift, it makes a star. Now let go of the mouse, let go of shift, and I could move this into position, maybe scale it down. So that's the typical star. Now if you want a perfect star, the key to this is holding Option or Alt. So click on my star tool, hold shift, hold Option and then hold shift, or hold Alt and hold shift, and if you click and drag and release, now you see you have this perfect star with the this perfect horizontal here. So up to you, whichever one you want to choose. So I'm going to do this one here. I like this one a little bit better. Select both of these, and I'm going to change my stroke to 1 point, and I'm going to delete this star. So there we go. We have all of our basic shapes here for this penguin character. Okay, so now we notice that we are done, pretty much done with it. So let's go ahead and delete our template layer, which we don't need. We could see what's black or what's shaded, which would be the tail, the wing, and this back body part, as well as the beak. and we could go ahead and delete our template. So select our template layer, delete it. It says it contains artwork. Let's double check. Okay, so it's only the link. If there was any shapes here, we would want to get them out because we're deleting this whole layer and anything that's in it. So delete, yes, and there we go. We have all of our shapes here. Okay, so we could start thinking about colors that we want to do here. So obviously this main body here, we want it to be white, black. So I'm going to select this shape, and since we already have black as a stroke and no fill, we're going to swap these. So now we have black there. Now I'm going to click away, and I want to make sure that this is at the very bottom of my paths, and it is. Now it's hard to see, we kind of lose everything else, but if we do the Command Y, we could access all of these paths and shapes. So let's go ahead and do Command Y again, and if we hover over, once we land on a certain shape, we could select it as well. So it'll kind of show up if we hover over it. So let's select that circle, and let's change this to a white fill and no stroke. And now, since our stacking order, since this kind of eye part is right above the white ellipse, it shows. Now let's select the square here, the belly part. I'm going to select that, Command Y, and I'm going to change that, the same thing, to a white fill with no stroke. And we could do that the same way that we did that ellipse, or we could just select the eyedropper tool here and sample the ellipse here, the circle, and that does that. It fills it with white with no stroke. Now let's go ahead and select the tail and hold Shift and select the nose part here. And if you do Command Y, hold Shift and select the wing. Command Y. So you want to make sure that you select right on the paths of these, and then let's just swap the fill because we want it to be a black shape with no stroke. So now this wing was made underneath this. So what we want to do is just drag it up, and I already showed you that we could drag this up in the layers, or we could do object, arrange, bring to front, or we have another way. We could also go into our properties panel. So that gives us the properties for that shape, and we could do arrange and bring to front there as well. So we have a lot of these things in different places. Now let's go ahead and work on the badge here. So I'm going to select the badge, and I'm going to give it a color. So I'm going to do the fill. I could double click here in the, actually I could click once in the properties, and I'm going to give it kind of like a goldish, orangish color. Zoom in, Command or Control plus, and I'm going to change the stroke to none. So select here, do none, and I'm going to click on the star now, and I'm going to change the fill to, let's see what looks good here. Let me get rid of the stroke first. I'm going to do this like deeper red. Now what I want to do is I want to group these, that way in case I want to click it and move it around, I'm not just selecting one of the shapes. So Command Z to undo, or Control Z. So I'm going to zoom in, select first this orange shape, hold Shift and select the star. And if we go to our layers panel, you could see both of them are selected. Now I could go to Object and Group, or Command or Control G. So that groups them into one. So now if I zoom out, if I click away and I drag that out, it takes it as one. Now let's go ahead and select one of these feet. I'm going to go to my colors here. I'm going to do a lighter orange here. I'm going to select the other one in front, and I'm going to do a darker orange. Now I'm going to click away. I'm going to select both of these, so hold shift to select both, and I'm going to get rid of the stroke. So I'm going to go up here, select no stroke, and I'm going to move this part of the foot behind, so that one's going to be dragged behind this. And actually it should technically be behind this rectangle. So that way this part of the rectangle, I know it's very small, but it'll be like on the other side of the body here. And there we go. So there's our penguin. So now let's go ahead and select everything. And if you hold shift and scale it down, notice how the wings, the nose area, and the tail, they kind of change, right? That's because that corners, those corners are scaling. So let's undo. If we go into our properties panel, click to deselect everything. That is because scale corners is not checked. So if I click on scale corners, make sure scale corners and scale strokes and effects are on. Obviously nothing selected. Now if we select everything and hold shift and drag it down, notice how it scales perfectly. So it just depends. Sometimes you might want to scale things, those corners, sometimes you might not. And the other one is, if I click away, it's scaling the strokes. So if I don't have scale strokes, and I select this, now keep an eye on this eye part because that is a stroke. So if I scale it down, notice how the stroke stays the same size. If I go down to like the smaller size, it changes it quite drastically. So I'm gonna undo, back to my original size. So just keep in mind, your properties panel with nothing selected, most of the time you want these checked on, but sometimes you might not want it. So there we go. So now we want to group this whole thing as a shape or as a group. So I'm going to click and drag to select everything, go to object and group. And let's go ahead and hold shift and drag it up and make a big shape out of it. So there is our penguin. And it's hard to see like the outline of this belly part because you know it's white on white, but if we were to move this out, there we could see our penguin. So let's go ahead and save it and let's make a new artboard. So we're going to go to our artboard panel, make a new artboard. I want to close down my penguin layer. If you notice, there's within this penguin layer we have a group, which is our main group, and then we have everything in there, and then we have our subgroup, which was that little badge. But let's go ahead and close it down, lock it, and we're going to make a new one, a new layer, and I'm going to name this gear. So now I'm going to go to File, Place, and I'm going to select the Gears 2 JPEG. Let's try this again. Let's do it where one's a template, one's not. So Gears 2, make sure link is checked, template is not, and click place, and then just click and drop it in. Now let's also do a file place again. Select Gears 2, but this time we're gonna click on templates and click place. So notice the difference. Now let's say we're building shapes right above them, so I'm gonna just do an ellipse tool, and you don't have to follow just yet, but I'm gonna make this shape over this shape over this. Now remember Command or Control Y so we could see the paths. If I do Command or Control Y, this one that is a template, it shows me the image underneath it. So this is where we could copy stuff, we could, you know, work with it. If we have the pen tool, we could, you know, trace something exactly. Let me delete that. On this one, the image is just shown with an X, a square, and an X. So that's the benefit of placing it as a template as opposed to a as just an image without a template. And also when you place a template, it locks it. So let's go ahead and delete this one, this gear, delete it. We want to keep our template one, and select the gear, gear layer. Now let's start off with the circle. I'm going to click on my ellipse tool, and I'm going to do a black stroke with no fill, and make sure the stroke is set to 1 point. And I'm just going to click and drag, hold shift, try to get it pretty close. Now I'm going to click on my selection tool. Every time I scale it up, I'm going to hold shift just to get it, just to keep it at an exact circle. So there we go, pretty close. I'm going to do Command Y, and there it is. Maybe a little bit bigger, but not much. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to make a copy of the circle. Or actually I'm going to make another circle, but I'm going to do it at this width. So I'm going to make a copy of it. So hold Option and drag it out. And I'm going to hold Shift and scale it. And just kind of manipulate it here. And there we go. It's pretty good now. Notice here as I'm scaling it up, it's also changing the stroke. This one was at a 1 point something, 1.0514. This one's at a 1.7925. So this is an example of when you would want to not scale your stroke. So let me delete this. Let's change this one to a 1 point stroke. So now if I click away, go to my properties panel. Now if I uncheck scale strokes and effects, now if I make a copy of this, select this ellipse, hold Option and drag, and now if I hold Shift and I scale it, it's still a 1 point stroke even though we resized it. So that's when that would come into play. If not, you would have to select both and change the strokes to match, unless you specifically wanted them to not match. So let's go here, pretty close, and drag it there. Now if you're a little bit off, one thing you could do is you could align both of these ellipses, and to do that you would select both of them. Now you could click on, in your properties panel, you could align it to what's called a key object, and now you would select which one's your key object. That's the one that's going to stay in place. So I want this one to stay in place. So you see that one now is selected. They're both selected, but this one's a key object. Now you could click on horizontal align center, so that aligns them at the center here, and then do the vertical align center, so that aligns them here. So now they are perfectly aligned with each other. So again, you want to select which one is the key object first. If this one was off like that, you select both and you select your key object. Now if this one's your key object and now you go to align them, this middle one is moving and this outer one is not. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to select both of these, and we want to create kind of like a donut here, so we want this to be a hole. So we have two shapes with no fill, only strokes. So let's select this one and let's make it blue just so it changes, and no stroke, and let me make that a different blue. Now the other one is underneath, so we cannot see it. So I'm going to go to my layers panel, open up the gear layer, and I'm going to bring this ellipse up, and I'm going to change this to, doesn't matter the color, and no stroke. Now I'm going to select both of these, go to my Pathfinder, and I'm going to do the minus front. So we're using that first circle to put a hole into this one. So now this one is technically a donut, so we could see through it. I do Command Y, and I could see everything still matches perfectly. Now I'm going to do one of these parts of the gear. In order to do that, I'm going to click on my rectangle tool. So I'm going to make a rectangle. So I'm going to start at this top left-hand point of this part of the gear, drag it down. In here it doesn't matter, and I'm going to do this. Actually, I'm going to change the color just so you could see what's happening, but you don't need to change the color. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my direct selection tool. I'm going to click this bottom left point, hold shift, select the bottom right hand point. So now I have both of these points selected. If I click and drag, notice how I'm moving both at the same time. Let me undo. Okay, so with both of these points selected, I'm going to click on my scale tool, double click actually, and then right here under uniform, we're going to scale just both of these points, and we're going to scale them 200%. And let's see if that's pretty close. That's actually spot on. So that changes this. It's only scaling these to 200%. Now, if I had this and I scaled it without choosing those points at 200%, we can see the preview before and after. So it scales the whole thing. So that's why I chose only certain points. What you could do also is you could select both of these points, scale these. Now if I scale these to 50%, click OK, now that scales these down. So you could have done it the opposite way and scale these down if these points are matching. Okay, so let's go ahead and save, and I'm going to zoom out a bit. Now I just realized that I probably should have left this circle because I needed to align to the center of that circle to rotate this around instead of copying individual parts of this. For example, copying it, rotating it, copying it, rotating it. But that's a lot of guesswork. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a circle. So I'm going to click on my ellipse tool. Using the smart guides, I could see where these intersect. So I want there. Now if I click and drag, just as those points, those pink lines are showing the center of the circle, and drag, and then before letting go, I'm going to hold Option and hold Shift. What Option does is it makes a shape from the center, and I'm going to let go there. Notice if I was making a shape, it starts from the top left hand side, top right hand side, but if I drag and hold Option, it takes it from the center, and Shift keeps it as a perfect circle. Same thing with the square. So I'm using that function. Now I'm going to click on my selection tool, select this top gear, and actually let's make sure it's aligned. So I'm going to hold Shift and select the circle, and I'm going to go to my Align panel. I want to align it to a key object, and I want to make this my key object, so the circle. And now I want to align it horizontal align. So there we go. We don't want to align it here because that's going to take it to the center. We don't want it there. We just wanted to make sure it wasn't off just a little bit. We wanted it right, aligned exactly. So now that this is selected, we're going to click on our rotate tool. Now we're going to hold Option or Alt, and go down and click where it says center, at the center of this circle, which is going to be the center of this circle as well, and click. So now you get this rotate tool, rotate dialog box for the rotate tool, and we're just going to test it out. So we're going to it's going to rotate on this point. So let's try 25 degrees. Turn preview off and on. And we want it to match here, so it's going to be a little bit more. So let's try 30. Turn preview off and on, maybe 35. And 35 seems close. Let's Let's try 36. Let's try 36. And instead of clicking OK, we're going to click copy. So that copies it. Now don't click anything else or anywhere else. Now what you want to do is copy the same exact thing we did. So the shortcut for that is Command or Control and D as in David. So every time I do the Command or Control D, it's copying the same exact thing we did. And I'm going to click on my selection tool. I'm going to delete this circle, the inner one. Now I'm going to select all of these, and these are all the same color. So one thing that I could do is I could click on the magic wand tool and select one of these. That selects all of them, everything that is the same color. Now you could click on your eyedropper tool and select this gear or the circle part, and now it is a gear. Now let's go ahead and delete our templates, and there is our gear. Now we still have it in separate shapes. Let's make a copy of this. I'm going to select everything, hold Option and Shift and drag it out. So on this one, let's go ahead and group it, Command or Control G. And on this one, let's go ahead and select everything, and let's go ahead and go to Pathfinder and click on Unite. So again, they both look exactly identical, but if you do Command Y, you could tell this one is its own shape, and this one is a group of several shapes. So it just depends how you want to leave things, but you know, this is cleaner, but both of these will work, and you could resize these both. If you select both, hold Shift, resize them, it'll work perfectly since it's off just fills, no strokes. So that is how to make a gear and rotate these shapes. So think about it like the sun, a flower, anything that has shapes or patterns repeating, you know. You could try different percentages of the rotation to where it all matches exactly, things like that. So yeah, so there's that. And let's go ahead and lock the gear, and let's go and do our last one. So let's actually save before that. And let's go ahead and create a new artboard. It's actually not our last one, I believe there's two more. So let's go to File, Place. It's grayed out. Let's go ahead and make a new layer. I believe this one should be Shark. Name it Shark. Then go to File, Place. Click on Shark. And whoops, I accidentally didn't do template, so let's delete it. File, Place it as a template. So click on Shark, Template, and Place. Now this one's huge, so we're going to have to unlock the template for the shark. Scale it down, hold Shift, and go ahead and lock it up. Lock it up again and select shark, the shark layer, and zoom in. So again, this one, we could just start looking at basic shapes. So I'm gonna see that there's kind of a circle here. So I'm going to click on my ellipse tool. Color doesn't matter, so I'm gonna use a blue stroke with no fill, and I'm gonna do kind of like an oval here, try to match the curvature here. So I'm gonna select this, maybe make my stroke a little bit bigger so we could see it. So again, doesn't have to be exact, but make it pretty close. Now I could use my direct selection tool, select this one, and I could use my right arrow key to move it as well. And I could shorten this if I want, shorten this one. That's pretty close. Now I'm going to use a rectangle to cut this part out, right? Because I'm only trying to match this curve. So I'm going to use a rectangle, click and drag, trying to match the top. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. So now I can select both of these. Pathfinder, I'm gonna do the minus front. So that still leaves this shape, so I could always go back and select this shape. But now that one's part of this one, so it's a group. So I could always go to my group selection tool, which is nested under my direct selection tool, select this one, and just delete. Now we could do this with the set of triangles. So I'm gonna click on my shapes, go to my polygon tool, click and drag, and then use my down arrow key, and that gives me a triangle. Click on my selection tool, drag it. Now I'm going to use my direct selection tool, select this one and move it here. Select this one and see where it intersects here. Maybe I want to put it here actually. Now we have a couple ways to make these round. So if you remember, we could select one of these anchor points, make it round, and make this match. So that's one way, and we could do the same thing to this other one and make it match. Or we could select the pen tool, and if we go over the path and hold Option or Alt, and you see that little curvature, that'll curve the point here. So we do that, drag it, and then let go of the mouse, let go of Option or Alt, and let's do that to this one as well. So that's another way that you could make curves, but that one is curving a path as opposed to curving the points. So let's actually do the same thing here. So we're going to use the pen tool, and I'm just going to click in here. I'm going to click the points, click here, here, basically anywhere where these lines meet. And then I'm going to go here and connect this. Now I'm going to hold Option or Alt again, and I'm going to put my cursor right on this path, like on the center part, and drag this up for it to match. Drag this up a little bit, drag this in, drag this down, and go ahead and select your pen tool, and there you go. So there's some basic shapes. Now on this one, if you notice, it is not, this one is not connected. If I do Command Y, this fin is not connected. So we're going to treat it like that. So I'm going to click on my pen tool, select here, and select here. Now hold Option or Alt and drag this one here and drag this one here. And press Escape. And there we have that shape. And we have this little guy here. So let's go ahead and make that one as well. Or let's actually make that one with the polygon tool. So a little triangle. Zoom in. Let's rotate it. Click on the selection tool to move it. Make it a little bit bigger. Now we could use the pen tool and hold Option or Alt and give it its curves. And there we go. Okay, so I'm going to use my selection tool. And I'm going to click and drag to select all these shapes. And I'm going to go to my Pathfinder tool and click on Unite. So now we have that whole shape. Now I'm going to zoom into the eye. The eye is simple, it's just an ellipse. I'm going to hold Shift, click and drag. And let me actually swap the fill and the stroke, and I'm going to change it to black. So I'm going to click and drag to the bottom left or bottom right. The same thing with the nose, hold Shift and drag. Now I'm going to do the teeth or the mouth. So I'm going to use my pen tool. So I'm going to click here at this point, here at about this point, here at about this point. So I want to stay right on the this outline stroke and click here. Now I want to swap this so that it's a stroke. And let's go ahead and do that whole Option or Alt and drag these lines here. And let's bring this one out just a little bit, just so it matches the contour of the main shape. And let's swap this. Let's actually make this a fill of white. So double click on the fill, drag it to the top leftmost corner, click OK. So now if we do Command Y, we're able to see this part of the teeth, or this line that makes up the teeth. And I'm going to actually click away to deselect everything, click on my pen tool. Now I'm going to click here, here, kind of like where the parts meet, the sharp parts of the teeth. And then I'm going to hold Option or Alt and then drag the curves again. So bring them all forward just a little bit. And press Escape. Now we could do Command Y. And somehow I lost the fill here, so I'm going to choose a white fill. And I'm going to up the stroke on the mouth, so something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and change the, actually let's add the fins or the gills here. So we could do those again with just the pen tool, or actually with the line segment tool. We could click and drag here, basically the starting points, and then click on our pen tool and then Option or Alt and drag these out. And let's select all three of those gills and let's change the stroke to, I don't see my stroke panel. We could always go to Properties and change the stroke, select stroke and do the round caps on there. Now let's go ahead and choose, if you see we have like 3 different levels of grays. So we have light gray, a medium gray, and a dark gray. Let's just use 2. So let's choose a shape that goes around everything here. So I'm going to use an ellipse, pretty much like this, and then shape it to trying to match this roughly, and then I'm going to manipulate this maybe like that. So what I want to do now is I'm trying to get this bottom part to be a darker gray. So I'm going to select both of these shapes, the outline of my shark and this shape that I made, and use the shape builder tool and use Option or Alt and click and drag into this top part. So now I could use my selection tool, select my shark, and I'm going to double click on the fill and go to like about a medium gray, click OK, and make sure I have no stroke. And now I'm going to click on this shape above and I'm going to do no stroke, and I'm going to do a lighter gray. And now this shape is on top of everything, so I just want it right above this main body shape. So I'm going to go into my layers panel. So I'm going to bring this path right over this one. And there we go, we have a shark. So I'm not going to go ahead and do the background. Feel free to practice if you want. But I just wanted to get the main shape of the shark. So let's go ahead and close down the shark. This template layer, I'm going to delete it. Yes, and there is our shark. And actually, before we do that, maybe we want to add an outline since we do have this outline of the teeth. So I'm going to select not the lighter shape here, but the dark gray shape. And if you notice, what that shape did was it basically made a copy of everything, but just with this selection. And we'll have a project later on where we're doing a self-portrait, and we're going to be using this a lot, the shape builder tool, to create shapes like this out of a shape that's already there. So let's select the bottom shape, the darker gray, and let's add a stroke. So let's add a black stroke, and let's bump it up a little bit, so it'll be maybe add a 4-point stroke. And now I'm realizing that this shape it's right on the center of it, so you want to put the stroke on the outside, right? So select on this, and let's click on our stroke panel. It's right here, and let's align the stroke to the outside. So now this all matches perfectly because those paths were exactly the same. So now that looks a lot better. And we could always go ahead and group it just to make it easier to manage. Instead of managing all these layers at once, I could click and drag, select everything, and Command or Control G. So that gives us a group. And there is our shark. Alright, now let's go to our last one. So let's lock up our shark layer. Let's go ahead and add a new one, a new layer, and we're going to name this helicopter. And let's go ahead and add a new artboard where we're going to work on there. And let's go to our artboard panel, add a new artboard, and let's go ahead and go to File, Place. Select our helicopter, make sure it's a template, go ahead and place it. Let's unlock it and select our helicopter. Make sure we're on our selection tool, hold shift and scale it down just a little bit. And then go ahead and lock it again. Now select your helicopter layer, and let's build this one out. So on this one, again, we're going to keep this one fairly simple, just basic shapes. So let's start off with just the outline. So we're going to do no fill and a black stroke, or any color that you want. And I'm going to start off with an ellipse. I'm going to go a little faster on this one. I'm going to move my stroke down to 2 points. And I'm going to rotate it a little. Let me change the color on the selector just so we can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to do dark blue. I actually don't know if that'll get confusing, but let's go to brick red. Okay, there we go. Rotate this a little bit. A little more oblong here. Click on my direct selection tool. Select this and manipulate it a little bit. It's more like a weird egg shape here. Okay, now I'm gonna do a rectangle here. And I'm going to click on my direct selection tool. another one here. Click on my direct selection tool. Whoops. Select one of these points. Match these up. Now if I really want to follow it exactly, I could add those curves to it. So I'm going to actually join these two shapes right now. So select both of these and Pathfinder and Unite. Click on my pen tool and I could hold Option and drag up on this, or Alt and drag up on this, and this one, and this one. There we go. So there's that shape. Now I could use my rounded rectangle tool. I'm gonna click and drag on that. And I'm gonna click on these corners and make them super round because I'm looking at this being really round. If you don't have these, you could go to View and Hide Corner Widget, and that'll bring them up. So now I'm gonna rotate this one. And it has a kind of like more of a rounded shape there, so let's bring that one here. Starting to look a little funny here. So I'm gonna get rid of one of these points. I'm gonna select that one, and remember to get rid of it, you could always go to the pen, delete anchor point tool, or you could select here. And that's just a glitch. Zoom out and in. So you want to make sure you don't just select the point and delete it with the direct selection tool. So now I could round this one off, and that's not going to be perfect, but we'll try to get as close as possible. So maybe something like that. Now I have these leg parts, so I could just use a regular rectangle tool and then pen tool and curve these out a little bit. And now I could copy this and make it a little taller just so that they all intersect. And then I'm gonna copy this one. Pretty good. Now I could do an ellipse right here. And I could start off with another ellipse right here. So I'm going to start this off here. Click on my direct selection tool. I'm going to select this point and drag it over here. Then I could move these down just to get that tapered look. I'll round this off a bit. This looks pretty good. I'm going to make a copy of this. Hold Option. Drag that down that way. I want to make them go into this little part because we're going to hide them behind. I'm going to click on my direct selection tool and bring this point up here. And then I could use my pen tool, click here and drag. As I'm dragging, it's going to leave a curve, and then click escape and do the same thing here. Now I'm going to make this shape here. So I'm just going to use a rectangle tool because it looks kind of like a rectangle, but it's round. And then I'm going to actually click on my direct selection tool, select this point first, and then drag it. So that kind of gives me that shape. Select this one first and then drag it. And then this one. So that kind of sort of does it. And what else do we have? Let's do this shape here. So we're going to use a cutout for that. So I'm going to just make a square here and pen tool, Option Alt, and kind of match that. And let's do another one of these propellers. So that's just going to be a circle. So ellipse tool, hold shift and drag. Let's do one of these, another one, direct selection tool. Maybe we could rotate it just to get that point, this point down here. Move this one, whoops, select this point here, drag it here. Selection tool, copy it and rotate it. And I want to get it right in that circle. And there we go. Okay, so let's do this body part first. So I'm going to select both of these. Actually, I'm going to select this one and let's make it a double click here. I'm going to make it like a burnt orangish color. Click OK. So that's going to be the fill. And then I'm going to select both these shapes and I'm going to do the shape builder tool and then hold Option and drag to delete this outer part. Click on my selection tool. I'm going to select both of these and do no fill, sorry, no stroke. But then this shape here, if I do Command Y, I could select it and give it a fill of like a grayish bluish for the window. This part up here, I'm gonna swap it out so that it's a black fill, no stroke, and I want to hide that part underneath the body of the helicopter. So that just means I'm gonna send it to the back. So shortcut, Command or Control Shift and left bracket. So that sends it to the back. This propeller, I'm gonna change the fill to like a gray and no stroke. And I'm going to send that behind as well. Shift, Command or Control, left bracket. And I'm going to select this right part of the propeller, click on the eyedropper tool and select this part. Select this left propeller and then selection tool, Shift, Command or Control and left bracket to send it to the back as well. Now I'm going to select both these, hold Shift and then select both of these lines, and I'm going to change it to this first width profile with the 2 sharp points. Now this tail part of the helicopter, I could select the eyedropper tool, select the body, and then these 2 parts of the propeller, hold Shift and eyedropper tool, do the gray, and then this circle, I want to swap it so that it has a black fill, and then I want to bring this to the very front. So Command or Control Shift and right bracket this time. Now let's select this part and I want to do no stroke, but I want to do a fill of maybe like a brighter orange. Hold Shift and select the tail part of the body and then go to our shape builder tool, hold Option and remove the top and bottom parts, or Option or Alt. Let's do both of these like leg parts. Hold Shift, select both of them, eyedropper tool and select the gray from our propeller, and let's send those behind the body. So This time let's go to our helicopter layer, select both of these, so you have to select them here, and bring those underneath the body here, that oval. And then let's select both of these, the landing pads, I don't know what they're called, and click the eyedropper tool, and let's make those the same orange. Now we want to select this one, the one that should be behind, and we can see where it's selected here. Take that one behind everything as well, and there we go. There's our helicopter. And we could now close this and delete our template. So there's our helicopter. Feel free to mess around with colors, the shapes a bit. So there's everything. And then once you're done, let's go ahead and select this whole helicopter shape. Right click and group, or Command or Control G. Okay, now that is it for the first practice exercise. So we'll have a few more of these exercises as well as the book projects. So go ahead and save this. And then once you are done, that is what you're going to upload onto Schoology. So we can close that down. And we want to make sure you turn in your Illustrator practice exercise with your name.ai file. So that's going to be what is uploaded onto Schoology. Thank you once again for following along, and we'll see you on the next tutorial.